Welcome, everyone. Welcome again. If you've joined us or if you're just trickling in now to Rodale Institute's Certified Organic Mushroom Production webinar. I'm Bridget Gilmore. I'm the Organic and Rock Market Coordinator for our consulting team, and I'm joined as a panel host by Leah, who is also part of our consulting team. We work with farmers across the country and around the world to help and support in their transition to organic and regenerative organic agriculture. We're really excited today to have an all-star group of panelists to talk more about mushrooms. And the reason why we wanted to talk more about mushrooms is because they're eligible for organic certification under the NOP, but they're not a crop, they're not livestock, they're fungi, and it makes for a little bit of complicated regulation, a lot of gray area. So we wanted today to talk more about certification. So our agenda for today will get started with certification, setting some foundational elements for understanding what certification looks like and why it's different from crops and livestock. And then we'll get into organic mushroom production. We'll talk a little bit more about organic mushroom markets, and we'll revisit certification. We'll wrap up our conversation by checking back in with certification, and then we'll have some time for questions from the audience. We'll have a conversation with our panelists, and then we want you to save questions along the way, write them down and submit them through the chat, and we'll collect those. Hopefully we'll get to all of them, and if we don't, we know there's so much to talk about here today. If we don't, we'll follow up with you and make sure you get an answer to your questions.
I just wanted to add for the audience, please type your questions in the Q&A, not the chat, but both are fine. Q&A is just best. But yeah, you can write up your questions as they come during the webinar, and we will try to ask them all at the end.
Good clarification. Thanks, Leah. Q&A, not the chat. Awesome. So let's get started. Let's set the foundation for the certification conversation. We'll start with Katie, who's with Pennsylvania Certified Organic, PCO. She joined PCO in June 2020 as a certification specialist and has a Bachelor in Science from Penn State University's College of Agricultural Sciences. She also has her master's in sustainable food systems from Green Mountain College. She previously worked for Penn State Extension and specialized in both producer and consumer education with the mushroom farm community in southeastern Pennsylvania. And before joining PCO, Katie worked as a flock supervisor for a commercial turkey company and coordinated animal welfare and organic certifications for contract growers. So thanks for joining us, Katie. We want to get started by talking about why are we talking about organic mushroom production in this conversation? What makes mushrooms different from crops and livestock in the NOP, the National Organic Program?
Sure. Well, as Tina will tell you here shortly, mushrooms are a fungi, so they don't fit directly into kind of either the crop or livestock standard as currently delivered by the NOP. So the importance, I think, at least for PCO, is many years ago, there was obviously a need, right, from producers that were already growing, and a need to look, to obtain that organic certification. So historically, and this is simply a geographic kind of situation, but the southeastern part of Pennsylvania, across 2 counties here in the southeast, grow more than 60% of our commercial button mushrooms. And so that was the immediate need, right, was to have an opportunity for farms to become certified in this region. So that's kind of where PCO came in and was able to develop an organic system plan specifically for mushrooms. So that's something that PCO offers, and that, organic system plan outlines a much more specific plan to go through all of your requirements. So your spawn, your substrate, your growing practices, water, facility pest management, all of those things are included. And certainly, as you know, there is no current regulation for mushrooms within the NOP. This is something that has definitely been talked about many times. I think Tina can give you more of the history on that as well. So currently, all certifiers are members of what's called the Accredited Certifiers Association. So this is a network of certifiers across the United States. The abbreviation is just the ACA. And so when we are unclear on a specific, how to kind of weigh in and look at a specific issue surrounding mushrooms, we can speak with other certifiers across the country and kind of hone in on, where are those areas and experience others are having that work directly with mushroom producers. So that's also what we can lean on and work to develop better kind of guidance documents and things like that surrounding maybe specific issues that come up as kind of this evolves.
Tina, I think you're on mute again.
Yeah,
There you are.
I'm trying to be a responsible panelist here and not bring my background noise. But just to be clear, mushrooms are a crop. By all other agencies in the government, mushrooms are considered a crop. And if they're not a crop, I don't know what they are, because they're not livestock. But they are different from other green crops because, of course, we're a fungus, not a plant, which makes it complicated. But from my perspective, certifying mushrooms to the crop standard works fine, as long as you have a certifier who knows mushrooms, which is why we go with PCO, because PCO certifies more mushrooms than any other certifier in the world, I would venture to say. But so they are a crop for sure.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Tina. And Tina and Katie, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how the different positions of and interpretations of certifiers around some of the elements of certification. Where do they vary and stray, and or how are they interpreted differently?
That's probably best for you, Katie.
Sure thing. So yeah, some of the variations I think you'll see will primarily revolve around substrate and how that substrate is developed. What are those inputs, and how do we look at those? So, and again, this varies. Tina will probably talk about this a little bit more, but it really varies when you go into specific species. So again, the large scale commercial mushroom production is in agaricus mushroom production. So your white button mushrooms, your portobello, your cremini, and they have a unique substrate that requires a lot of natural agricultural products inputs. So looking at those materials like horse bedded straw, poultry litter, things like that. There are some certifiers that require, for example, certified organic hay as an input. PCO does not require that. So because all of those ingredients are going through a composting process, they are not required as to be another certified, a specific certified input, I should say. So that's probably the biggest one. And then along with, if we go then kind of separate from that and go into what's identified as our specialty mushrooms. So basically all of the other mushrooms beyond the agaricus mushrooms, majority of those have some kind of hardwood or sawdust substrate growing medium. Certainly there's a variety of what those species like as a growing medium, but primarily that would be one that also varies among certifiers is looking at kind of tracing back to where that sawdust started. So you will see some variation in those requirements as well. And we can get into those or specific questions if they come later, certainly. But those would probably be, I'd say, the most common difference right now among certifiers is really in the inputs and substrate.
And speaking of questions, what are the most frequently asked questions that you get from growers around certified organic mushroom production, where there's need for more clarity?
I would say mostly probably just, again, around regulations and some of those gray areas, in the sense that like we do need more clarification on. I would say right now we're getting a lot more interest in the specialty mushroom area. So some of those questions might be more specific to around using other inputs and materials and what those restrictions are, for example, for biosecurity, cleaners, sanitizers, like kind of going that direction, I think is where there's more questions about using additional products in your growing system and those restrictions specifically. But that's probably the most common right now.
And then there's some quirky differences between, say, field crops and mushrooms. So you can foliar apply, I think it's calcium chloride to plants for a calcium deficiency. And some people try to apply that to mushrooms, but there really is, as far as I know, and I'm a mushroom scientist, there's no calcium deficiencies. There's no foliar calcium deficiencies in mushrooms. So there's just a few little quirky things that come up once in a while.
Great, thank you. We're going to shift the conversation now to a little more about mushroom production, and we'll be talking with Dan and Z from Flowering Sun Ecology Center. So hold on to any questions that Katie and Tina just sparked in your mind. We'll revisit certification after we take a step back and look more at production itself. So Dan and Z are here representing Flowering Sun Ecology Center. And Flowering Sun Ecology Center was born out of a communal vision to offer family and community beyond organic, nutrient-dense food, grown in harmony with the earth. They're a land-based organization with their hands in the soil and their eyes on the stars. They began a tree nursery in 2019 and initiated a mushroom growing business the same year. And both have continued to really flourish and grow. They're now entering their 5th year of production as a farm and are continuing to deepen those roots and to blossom. And they're based in Ellenville, New York. So Dan and Z, thanks so much for joining us. It's been really cool to learn about your journey just in our few conversations before this meeting. And let's get started. Can you tell us more about why you got into mushrooms and what that process was like?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Dan, and this is Z. Thank you so much for having us on here. And if it's okay, we'd love to talk a little bit about kind of how we got started and kind of how we transitioned to mushrooms, because the farm was started 5 years ago, and we really only started dabbling with mushrooms 3 years ago. And now where we're at, it kind of just fully took off, and it's the main source of, it's the main crop that we grow. It's the main source of revenue at our farm, and it kind of just like swept everybody by storm. Just everybody started getting involved in a really special way. I actually came here in the 3rd year, and I helped start the mushroom, but Z was here from the very beginning. So maybe Z can talk a little bit about how everything got started.
Yeah, we moved here, like Dan said, about 5 years ago. We bought the land and we wanted to start a farm to supply organic produce. We say beyond organic just as a way of saying that we really look at all of our inputs and don't necessarily just look at what can be classified as certified organic as an input, but what we really feel like is best for the environment, for the regeneration of soil, for our health, and more of like a whole, trying to encompass more of a holistic perspective. And yeah, we started with vegetables and
Go to the next slide.
And started a tree nursery at the same time. We're part of like a larger community, so there was a need for food for everybody at that point. And so we really started there, and we had a CSA, and we started selling to restaurants, and we built kind of a clientele, did some grocery stores, small co-ops and things like that. And our first mushroom production was shiitakes on logs, which was really great. And one of the members of the farm, who's not here, his name is Chris, was really into mushrooms and just kind of had a vision of of someday doing mushrooms in a bigger way. And like Dan said, he came in our third year. And then Dan was already really into mushrooms and foraging and has a lot of knowledge and background. And so we were like, okay, this is what we need to really start this. And at that point, you know, we had like a customer base and everybody was really interested in the mushrooms. And I feel like the mushroom, you know, mushrooms are like a really hot topic right now for everybody. So it was a really good time for us to kind of start growing.
You go to next slide. When Z first got here, this is kind of what it looked like. There was literally nothing here. Like 5 years ago, this was just an empty patch of land with kind of a rundown house. And, you know, everything was built fully by Z and the community of people that was here. So it's pretty remarkable how everything got changed in such a short period of time. Go to the next slide.
Some more of our vegetables. This is the beginning. We did a lot of lettuce and stuff like that. You can go to the next slide. More vegetables. Go to the next slide.
We love different colors. So this was when I first got here. This was the very first mushroom that I grew over here, and it was I learned everything from YouTube and reading books, and that's some pasteurized straw that I inoculated with some pink oyster, and it's a huge, you know, massive substrate and a tiny little mushroom, but I was so excited. And we just built a little shed. It wasn't insulated. We just covered it with plastic, and that's what we had. We didn't really have much money, and this is kind of what we started with. But we wanted to do it, and we loved mushrooms, and the passion was there. And the interesting thing about mushrooms right now is that you can start with, you know, a low overhead. You know, you don't need a lot of land. You could do it in a relatively small space. So the way that we first started, we didn't really have a facility to, you know, make our own substrate blocks. We didn't have a place to sterilize our blocks. We didn't have a clean room with the lab. So we actually started to order ready-to-fruit blocks. And there's quite a few companies, actually Kenneth Square, they produce a lot of ready-to-fruit blocks. So we purchased ready-to-fruit blocks from them. And we also purchased some from Main Cap and Stem, who's another great supplier. And that was how we started. And interestingly enough, almost immediately, we decided to get certified organic because we saw that, you know, specialty mushrooms are a high-end crop. And a lot of the stores that we wanted to sell them to, they required organic certification. So almost immediately, we were like, okay, we gotta like do this. And it was pretty easy to get it certified because the ready-to-fruit blocks that we were purchasing, they came with the certificate. So then we just had to fill out the paperwork, you know, and have the proper, you know, packing facilities, cleaning facilities, you know, water, and then keep all the correct records. But, you know, past all that, it was a pretty simple process getting the mushrooms certified. So it was really nice to kind of go through with that. And then, yeah, since this moment 3 years ago, everything kind of just started, you know, expanding like really fast. You know, we started out maybe growing, you know, 5 pounds a week, 10 pounds a week, you know, 20 pounds a week, then, you know, 50 pounds a week. And we would constantly be selling out. And, you know, 3 years later, right now we have about maybe 7 or 8 people working here. And we're doing about, you know, 650, 700 pounds a week. And these are the different mushrooms that we have. They're so beautiful. That's some of our combs tooth, blue oysters, pink oysters, and lion's mane. And yeah, it's just been growing. We have 4 grow rooms now. We have a lab space where we sterilize and inoculate our own blocks, incubation space, And yeah, we're ready to expand right now as well. So yeah, these are some of our different mushrooms. That's the golden oysters. There's the chef mix box. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey. And we really, one of the most amazing things is that we're all here doing it together. We have a lot of really amazing people who live here, and the mushrooms have been really touching us all, in different ways. And it's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. The mushrooms they have certain needs, and if you don't meet them, they're not happy. So you need to be there, and you constantly need to be attentive. They grow so fast, they double in size in 24 hours. So it really requires a lot of attention, with all the different sensors and infrastructures that we have. But yeah, it's truly been a wonderful journey. So we're really grateful. We want to keep moving forward. We're still a pretty small, farm, but it's been really creating a lot of opportunities here for the people who live here, and really it's been really helping us deepen our roots to the extended community. We're really looking to get into education, because that's one of the deeper parts of our mission, is to really help educate people about organic practices and nutrient dense foods, how to give back to the earth. So we're using kind of the mushrooms to kind of help us with those missions. And yeah, thank you guys so much. We'd love to answer any questions that anybody has. And
Great. Thank you, Dan and Z. It's great to see how much the farm has blossomed in just a short amount of time, and it's continuing to blossom. So thank you. Thanks. And up next, we have Tina to talk more about mushroom production, organic mushroom production. Tina is a mycologist, and she was recruited into the mushroom industry straight out of graduate school at the University of Maine. She's been working with mushrooms ever since, and she's worked for several mushroom related businesses. She's currently the technical director of Phillips Mushroom Farms, which is one of the largest growers, packers, and shippers of mushrooms. And it's a 4th generation family farm that was founded in 1927. They produce both organic and conventional mushrooms. And Tina has served on the Organic Material Review Institute, OMRI, Board of Directors, National Organic Standards Board, the Mushroom News Committee of the American Mushroom Institute, and she's been part of the PCO Board of Directors. I think currently part of the PCO Board of Directors. Was past tense. Among many other accolades, she's really passionate about mushrooms, as is everybody on this webinar, and she's made it her life's work. She's passionate about mushrooms as functional food and all the roles that they play in our environment. She lectures widely on mushroom cultivation, the history of the mushroom industry in the US, and she also is a mushroom farmer herself with her husband. So Tina, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about Phillips Mushroom Farms and why do you think it's important to be organic?
That's a great question. And I do work for Phillips Mushroom Farms. I've been there since 1995 or something like that. It makes me feel so old. But what Dan and Z were saying about mushrooms as food, as really important food, touches a nerve with me. And I just heard the other day that 52% of the people in the US never eat a mushroom, which troubles me deeply. We have a lot of work to do. So thank you everyone who's here and is going to go out and grow mushrooms to provide people with this fantastic food. There's things we get from mushrooms we do not get from other food. I'm not going to go into that here, but I'll go into a little bit of the history of Phillips Mushroom Farms organic certification. I came onto the farm in '95, and I have a long history with organic certification and with Rodale. I actually spent some time in college indexing organic pest control methods out of Organic Gardening magazine. So it was a good fit for us because a lot of us live and work right here on the farm, and we didn't like the things that we had to do. And at that time, we could bring our kids to work, we could bring our dogs to work. That's no longer true with all the food safety things that we have to comply with now, but it used to be, you know, much more of a place for families. And we wanted it to be a safe place for our families to come. And the growers didn't like working with chemicals. So it was just a really good fit for us. So we got certified with PCO in 1997. And so we've been certified for 25 years now. I started going to National Organic Standard Board's meetings because of the lack of a mushroom standard. So I started going to these meetings, I think in 2001. And before I knew it, the NOSB had passed a recommendation for certifying mushrooms. If you look up that recommendation for certifying mushrooms, it's really almost impossible to grow certified mushrooms based on that recommendation. So it sort of languished in regulatory land. So I keep going back to these meetings just to remind people, if somebody in the gallery, and this has happened a few times, stands up and says, it can't be organic if it's not grown in soil. Well, the mushrooms that we grow, they grow in compost, they grow on straw, they grow in wood, you know, wood chips, or they're not growing on soil, but they're still, I think, you know, worthy of being certified organic. And there's some really significant differences between certified organic mushrooms and conventional mushrooms in how they're grown, in the inputs, you know, raw materials. There's just and also just the oversight that organic certification gives you. So on a big farm like us, we are in the mushroom capital of the world, Kennett Square, which means we're in the mushroom disease capital of the world, which gives us extra challenges because, of course, we're surrounded by other farms that have disease problems. We have a virus problem right now in the industry. We get Cisgeiges, which is an interesting weed mold that sprung up a few years ago. So we have to be excellent growers and managers to maintain production in this environment.
Thank you. Yeah, you did a great job of speaking to some of the challenges that you can face. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about guidance that you wish you knew when you started focusing on mushroom production. Mushroom production.
Yeah.
So guidance for somebody starting out. Yeah.
Yeah. The one critical thing I would say is that that the organic standards are by their nature a moving target, because they're always, you know, as technology changes, as growing practices change, they really try hard to keep up with the regulation, and that means there's changes. So it's important to be present and part of the process. So a few years ago, we were talking about organic mushroom production. I was the only mushroom producer in the room, and on the national list at the time was cheese wax, but not for mushroom production. So most outdoor shiitake log growers were using cheese wax to seal up their inoculation points. And in one stroke of a pen, that would have been gone. So it's really important for organic certified operations in general, but more specifically, organic mushroom production operations, to stay apprised of what's going on with the regulation. Otherwise, we could find ourselves painted into a corner and not able to produce certified mushrooms. So I would say that's the big thing, is you really have to keep your eye on the regulatory process and hook up with a certifier who's looking out for you.
What's the best way to keep up?
The best way to keep up is probably to go with a certifier who certifies a lot of mushrooms and who's keeping an eye on the regulation, who will see those red flags, because they're keeping up with the regulation. That's part of their job. And they'll see something that's coming up and say, wait a minute, this is going to affect our clients, and, you know, work with us that way. I keep up because it's a grim little hobby I have. I can't help it. So if you have an interest in, you know, in how the sausage is made in organic regulation, which I do, you know, it's just fun to keep an eye on.
Thanks. And Tina, I'd love to hear more about the markets, that your market avenues with Phillips Mushroom Farms. You know, you're one of the largest out there. So what does that look like?
That means that you know, Phillips is a large farm, but also very, very innovative. So, you know, the whole time I've been there, and it's, well, a really long time, we're always trying something new. So bringing new kinds of mushrooms into cultivation, the organic certification, food safety, recycling, you know, we're trying to have a completely circular economy so that everything we use goes back out into agriculture as much as possible. So our markets are all across the board. We go to supermarkets, we go to restaurant chains, we go to wholesale. We have dried mushrooms, we have fresh mushrooms, we do processing. So any way to get mushrooms to people, that's what we're going to do. So we're always keeping our eye on new ways to do that. And mushrooms to animals as well. Mushroom byproducts. I mean, what's good for us also happens to be good for the animals that we depend on. So, you know, feeding our mushroom waste to different livestock situations makes them happier and healthier. It makes the food they produce happier and healthier. So any way we can get mushrooms and the goodness of mushrooms to people, we're on it.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, and it is pretty impressive how much mushroom production happens in Kennett Square. It's such a large, it's just amazing how much of the mushroom production in the country and in the world, right? It happens
Yes.
in Kennett Square.
Yes, and that's, you know, I won't go into it here, but there's 5 very clear reasons why it came here and 5 very clear reasons why it stays here. Of course, it's location, 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 and also this quirky expertise that there's a huge concentration of people who know a lot about producing mushrooms. The infrastructure, the buildings, the transportation, everything's sort of, you know, been built up around this part of Chester County and I'm blanking out the name of the county next door anyway. These 2 counties in Pennsylvania. So if you had to start a mushroom farm now, you wouldn't do it here because real estate is so expensive. But the capital has been spent, like in the case of our farm, 4 generations ago. So if you had to invest capital in starting a new farm in this area, it wouldn't make sense. The land is too expensive. And you know, when you can put up 72 townhouses or a mushroom house, people are putting up 72 townhouses, unfortunately. But I hope it'll stay here for a good long time.
Thanks for outlining the opportunity too. And we are going to continue on to talk more about markets with Chef Spike. So Spike is the co-founder and chef for Eat the Change. He's also the co-founder and culinary director for Plant Burger. He's a national recognized chef and restaurateur, as well as Bravo's top chef fan favorite. He combines his passion for food equity and education by working with organizations like CARE, DC Central Kitchen, and Food Rescue US. He also serves as the chairman of DC's Food Policy Council. And Eat the Change combines marketplace solutions with education and activism to empower consumers to make dietary choices align with their concerns around climate and health. And we wanted to have Eat the Change come and speak today because they have this newer mushroom jerky out. We'd love to learn more about it and how it came to be. So Chef Spike, tell us more about your mushroom jerky and why did you choose mushrooms? Why are they made of mushrooms?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, quick answer. It's all because of Tina. This is the reason why I'm in the mushroom jerky business. But to back up a little bit, you know, we hear about all the great work it goes into, growing this fungi and the farming of it. And as a chef, my entire career, I've always leaned onto our farmers and suppliers as inspiration to create, you know, delicious dishes that live on my menus. So my job as a chef, as a passionate chef that loves mushrooms of all kinds, my job is to make them delicious and bring them to market in a real innovative way. I've done this from a very young age when I was working in super fine dining restaurants and, using ceps and truffles and chanterelles and lobster mushrooms and so forth. And I've even done this in my fast casual restaurants, specifically Plant Burger, which is a restaurant we launched in 2019, which is all plant and fungi based. Actually, it was the precipice of how I got to meet Tina, really. And we were making shiitake bacon, for our one of our mushroom burgers. And we decided to take a trip to Phillips Farm to meet Tina and the rest of the crew. My co-founder, had been friends with Tina and communicating for a long while. And it was my first time really touring a mushroom farm, and I was blown away by just the techniques. I was blown away about the sustainability and the water usage of the crop. We have a couple guardrails for Eat the Change, which is our CPG business, and we have mushrooms as well, but we also have carrots and now just iced tea. But some of our guardrails are, we like to focus around only plants and the fungi kingdom. We really support biodiversity. So for us, it's all about eliminating the usage of the top 6 crops that are responsible for about 53% of our food supply. Really, if you think about it, come from rice, wheat, soy, potatoes, and cane sugar. So for us at Eat the Change, we eliminate all of those. Also, we like to lean into crops that are very water efficient. So I did touch on that. I think mushrooms are one of the most water efficient, sustainable crops out there. And then while we were visiting, the mushroom farm, Tina was kind of touring us around, and we had a wonderful day there, and we shared a lot of knowledge together. And but I think it was one of the last things that Tina said to us, or rather maybe Sean, but we kind of just said, well, what can we do to help this effort? What can we do to make mushrooms even cooler? And I think, one of them said, well, if you could just make mushrooms sexy again, or something like that. It was something rather like that. And, I took it as a challenge, and Seth and I, we had opened up Plant Burger, and we were using mushrooms on our menus there, but we were just conceiving Eat the Change, our CPG company. And we left, that visit at that farm with a lot of curiosity on what we could do in this space. And, Tina, as she always does, sent me back home with a ton of different varieties of mushrooms. And I started kind of hitting the kitchen. And one of the things that, I really enjoyed, and one of the things I like to do is meet the consumer where they're at, really, right? And mushrooms have always been that kind of, especially portobellos, have been that swap for meat-based preparations on menus. And, and then I looked at the jerky category, and I was like, wow, the jerky category is a massive business. There's nothing quite in the category that is plant-based. But more specifically, to go one step further, one of our other commitments for Eat the Change is whole foods, right? We don't really process foods in our CPG company. Everything gets processed to a certain extent, but we're not making plant-based jerky, for instance, out of pea proteins or things of that sort, right? One of the things that is really important about us is focusing on whole foods. So a little bit more of the undoing of the food system, kind of resorting back to food in their native form. And mushrooms being so beautiful and amazing as they are, I thought that would be something that we could tackle. So I set off to make different marinades, and I tried a variety of different mushrooms, from portobellos to shiitakes to creminis and buttons. And what we ultimately ended up doing is using a nice mix of portobellos, creminis, and button mushrooms. I thought that would also help into the biodiversity of it all. We also use the imperfect mushrooms from Phillips when we can, meaning sometimes, mushrooms are overgrown or blemished or bruised, and the imperfect ones are perfect for us because we make jerky out of them. And so we set out to make jerky. We introduced it with 5 different SKUs, 5 different flavor types. and I showed up to a beef jerky house with thousands and thousands of mushrooms from Phillips Farms. And I have to tell you, if I could have taken a picture of their face when I was like, "Hey, we're here to make mushroom jerky," they almost kind of lost it. So our jerky is produced in the very artisanal way that beef jerky is made, meaning we take our mushrooms, we marinate them in 5 different marinades, and we actually smoke our mushrooms with real hickory smoke. We use wood that has left over from furniture making or wood that has fallen, but we like to get that real smoke flavor into the mushrooms. And yeah, I think it produces a really delicious snack. I think one of the last things we could say is that, these snacks come in play at what I feel is, a new intersection in our food system, meaning, we're seeing the rise of snacking, right? Snackification. And we're also seeing, the rise of worrying about climate change and what you can do about it. And for us, that's the intersection we kind of play with. It's interesting how mushrooms can come into your life these days, and there's all sorts of great things and benefits that they can bring into your life. But also when we have this eco anxiety, if you will, mushrooms come in and let you have that tangibility of that you're actually doing something. So by investing in mushrooms, growing mushrooms, buying mushrooms, you're really investing in bettering the planet's health along with yourself. And then one final point, why organic? Obviously, we've been talking a lot about organic, and I just want to make sure I cover it. It's really simple when it comes to me. As a chef, we want to be able to deliver the most clean label, fresh food for you to eat. I understand there's a space for conventional, but I think we're seeing organic grow a lot larger. We try to stay away from chemicals in our foods that provide shelf life. So insecticides, fungicides, and all those things. I'd rather grow food and serve food that doesn't have that stuff in them. So we are 100% organic, and everything that we do at Eat the Change. And we value this awesome relationship we have with Tina, and we're looking forward to opening up more relationships with other farmers as well. So you can Flowering Sun Mushrooms. I was looking up the website where you guys are talking. I love your story. So but yeah, I mean, we're our next phase for us is we're producing, we just launched Just Iced Tea, which has come to replace Honest Tea that was discontinued from Coca-Cola. And in fact, we're playing around with mushrooms. I brewed some really awesome mushroom teas the other day from lion's mane. We use some oysters as well, shiitakes, even some bun mushrooms, some cold ice brewed mushroom teas, unflavored, is what I did the first time around, just to kind of taste it. But I'm excited. I'm all in, and thank you for having me as part of this panel today. So
great, thank you so much, Spike. Thanks for your passion. Each of you panelists, your passion's contagious. Tina, were you raising your hand to say something, or just the passion?
I got to unmute. So Chef Spike, while we got you here, I've been thinking a lot about mushroom ketchup. Just give it some thought.
Mushroom ketchup?
Mushroom ketchup. That's how, back in, 1500 to 1850, that's how people preserved their mushrooms. They made ketchup. You just don't see it anymore. So I'm doing some research. I'm going to do some trials in my kitchen, but any advice you can give me, I would appreciate.
Tina, I am all in on mushroom ketchup project. So let's make sure to continue that 100%. So I'm totally into that. I had no clue about that. So that's super interesting. I'll leave you one thing. One thing that I found, which, one thing that really got me jazzed about mushrooms, where when I visited Tina on that same visit for Plant Burger, and when we came into the yellow oyster mushroom room, I saw these root balls being kind of tossed to the side as they were trimming the fruiting bodies. And, I was kind of like, I'm always really curious when I'm visiting. And I asked Tina, I was like, what are those? And they're like, oh, these are the root balls. And they're, I actually take some home and fry them up, and they taste like chicken. And it kind of blew my mind. I was like, wait, what do you do with all that? She's like, oh, we usually compost, or they may go to waste, but sometimes, a case makes it to my house. And I was like, just like my mind was blown that there was like this root ball that was highly nutritious and delicious, and there wasn't a market for it. So of course I took a case home, and we tenderized them and marinated them, grilled them up, and then fried them. And sure enough, the fungi fried chicken was born at Plant Burger. I mean, Tina wasn't lying. I mean, this root ball was just amazing. Just even the way it pulled and the texture. We even sent it for some testing with the Mushroom Council, and it came back that they were more nutritious than the flowers. I mean, the fruiting bodies of them. So, anyways, it was mind blowing, and that's also kind of what really inspired me. Just the innovation in the space of mushrooms, down to I just tasted mycelium bacon the other day at an expo, and kind of was blown away on the advancement in that space. So yeah, really cool stuff.
Super cool. Thank you. And for anybody who's with us who isn't familiar with the acronym CPG, that's Consumer Packaged Goods, so CPG. And I love how you've outlined so many avenues for markets, Flowering Sun and Spike and Tina. So thank you. And now we'll get into some questions that we got from the audience, and then panelists, we'd love to have you ask each other some questions too that came up. We have about a little over 10 minutes. So we'll try to get to all of the questions. And again, if not, we'll make sure to get your questions answered. And do know that the webinar will be available, will be posted through our website in our education section. I'll put a link in the chat now, in about 1 to 2 weeks. So, all right, let's open up our question box. So first, Catherine Rose asked a question, and Flowering Sun, you answered, but I would love for you to be able to share this through to everyone outside of just the Q&A chat. So how was your certification process, and did it make an immediate impact to your company?
Yeah, it made a total immediate impact. We originally, we were doing our sales calls, and we had some places that wanted to buy mushrooms from us, but they said that we had to be certified. So it was kind of like, we knew once we get the certification, we have these customers locked in, because they didn't have the mushrooms in their stores and they wanted them. But one of their store requirements was organic certification. A lot of the high-end retailers, like Whole Foods and, stores of the similar nature, they have those requirements. Getting certified was pretty simple for the mushrooms, because back then we weren't actually producing our own substrate or even our own spawn. So we were just purchasing the ready to fruit blocks. So yeah, we just had to fill out the paperwork, get certain tests for the water, get our, the proper records. And yeah, it was very quick. Definitely recommend it.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. And I have another one for you. And Tina, feel free to jump in here too. How does your production change with seasonal weather changes despite having a greenhouse? I'm sure there's a difference in the cold weather temps versus summer. This question's from Lauren.
Yeah, we actually don't grow in a greenhouse right now. We have insulated grow rooms, but it does change seasonally as well, because we have a good amount of 8 really powerful AC units in the summertime, because the mushrooms like it cool. We try to keep our grow rooms below 62 degrees, between 58 and 62. But sometimes when it's 100 degrees outside and it's extremely humid, it's definitely challenging. And that's, once it gets hot, that's when you start seeing a lot of the bacterial contamination and other challenges. Additionally, even besides the contamination, if it gets to 65 degrees, the speed at which the mushrooms are growing, they'll fully be ready to to ship out to stores within 7 days or 6 days instead of 9 or 10 days, just for an example. So it could really throw off the schedule at which that we're providing mushrooms. So temperature control is extremely important, and I think anybody who's starting a farm talk to a HVAC, specialist, and really figure out all of the, dimensions and exactly how much cooling and how much heating you're going to need, and overshoot that. It's always better to overshoot that.
I'll say one more thing before I'm sure Tina has good things to say, but we do also grow mushrooms in a greenhouse because we have tons of spent mushroom blocks, and it's amazing agricultural waste for compost, and we use it on our vegetable farm now. But one of the things that we've done is we've made a lot of raised beds, and then we filled the aisles with our spent mushroom blocks. But these blocks still have a lot of energy, nutrition, food. It has all of the fungi still there. And so during the winter, when once it starts to get a little colder in our greenhouses, we'll get, massive clusters of all the different kinds of mushrooms from our grow rooms coming up in the greenhouse, in our high tunnels. During the summer, they're just like growing all over the place on the farm. And we generally don't sell those because they might have bugs or they have dirt on them. So they're just like a little bit harder to process, but we harvest and give them to our CSA members and eat them. And so it's like a nice kind of natural way to get mushrooms, at home, doing it that way.
Boy, I gotta say, I find that fascinating. And I do have a question about that. Do you find that it helps with your heat? Because mushrooms put out so much biological heat. So if you're putting those blocks in your greenhouses in the winter, do you feel like they're providing you with like a little extra warmth and humidity?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, heating, people use compost to heat greenhouses, and we've definitely found that, it's heat and it's also insulation. It's this mass, of sawdust and soy holes is, generally what we're using. So
yeah, that's very, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we, seasonally for us, we control our environments pretty assiduously. What the difference between the seasons is, where it comes for us, is that we have so much insect and disease pressure in the mushroom capital of the world, the mushroom disease capital of the world. We love to grow in the winter because those populations die back a little bit. It's a little more forgiving. But we run a huge amount of air conditioning, of course, because of that biological heat. So even in February, in a full agaricus house, we're running air conditioning because there's just so much biological heat happening.
Wow.
Awesome. Okay, I think we have room for about two more. I have one question from Christian. I'm going to pass to you, Katie, and then I'll try to summarize a couple of questions for the panel, and then we'll be wrapping up our time today. So, Katie, Christian asks, are there any considerations to the growing containers used with respect to regulation? So, for example, single-use plastic bags versus reusable buckets for growing oyster mushrooms.
So all of any plastic products, PCO would review regardless, but for the most part, because they're not directly not directly being planted in ground, like in a crop, a traditional row crop situation. So most of those would be allowed. And then certainly if you're doing reusable buckets, we would just want to, as part of your kind of standard operating procedure, you would have a wash down procedure, cleaning procedure for those to reuse. But certainly both are used.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions around getting started, resources for getting started. So how do you connect with and learn from other mushroom farmers? Are there groups like there are for gardeners and farmers? Maybe mushroom fairs? Somebody's asking specifically in Europe or Spain. Let's start
Tina,
with
you're
groups.
muted.
Oh.
Muting myself. Somebody else is muting me. I was getting the message. The North
Mhm.
American Mycological Association is a great place to hook up with mushroom groups. A lot of those are all about, going out on forays and learning how to identify edible wild mushrooms, but they also, most clubs have a cultivation group within them. So that's a good place to go. There's a mushroom short course every year. There's a mushroom festival here in Kennett every year, the Telluride Mushroom Festival. I love the book by Paul Stamets. I think it's Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms is a great resource. It's a great reference book. It even has extensive tables on raw materials. And so I like that one. But there's a lot of new ones on the market too. And also, of course, YouTube. I mean, you could watch YouTube for a month straight, 24 hours a day on mushrooms and mushroom growing.
While you're unmuted, Tina, do you mind? We have a specific question for you about your preferred mushroom varieties for winter growing.
Oyster mushrooms are very cold tolerant. And there's also some really good cold tolerant shiitake strains as well. Yeah, I think those two. I don't know, do Dan and Z have a thought on this?
Yeah, oysters are definitely great. Certain species of lion's mane are also good.
Kings.
King oysters like it colder. Snow. There's also within, the oysters, there's so many different types of varieties. So there's, the colder loving strains that are nice.
Yeah, another one would be Inokitake, Flammulina would be, it's called the snow mushroom because I find it in the wild, like at the edge of melting snow. So that's a good cold weather one as well.
And Dan and Z, you might have a question for Tina. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Z, do you want to ask?
Good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we were just we've definitely been experiencing some disease with our current grows as we've been scaling up, and we'd just love to hear your feedback because like you're saying, you're in the mushroom capital of the world, but also the disease mushroom capital, and how we've been experiencing a lot of bacterial blotch specifically in our grow rooms, and we've done so much to try to mitigate everything. And we've had consultations with many different professionals, and cleaned all of our water reservoirs. We clean meticulously every single day. And yeah, I'm just wondering kind of what you would recommend and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, during the the season when it's most humid, it's really hard to control bacterial blotch. There is actually an allowed material that you can use. I'm just trying to think of it. It's hydrogen peroxide based with some peracetic acid in it. It's put out by a company. I've got the camera on me, so I'm drawing a blank here. I will come up with it and email you a link. BioSafe Systems makes it. Yeah. So that's a good control for bacterial blotch. Otherwise, it's really airflow. But if the humidity's 90% outside, bringing that air in is not going to help. But airflow is one of the most important things you can do to control bacterial blotch.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll give that some thought. If I come up with anything else, I'll send you a message.
Yeah, it's definitely, the challenge is like having a small space, not the optimal, systems to it's hard to kind of control those things.
Yeah, take a look at your airflow. So go in with a lit cigarette, or there you can actually get little smoke sticks or whatever you can. Go in there into your grow room and look at where your air is moving and how fast it's moving, and where it's not moving, and make adjustments so that you get good airflow around your growing crop.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, we have a couple of more questions in the chat that I don't know if we'll be able to get to at this very moment. So know that this webinar will be, the recording will be posted on our website. I put that link in the chat. And the contact information for each of the panelists is is posted on their slide here. You can also reach out to Leah or myself. On the next slide, we have our contact information with our emails. And if you would like more information about our consulting team, you can check out this website as well. So thank you so much, Katie, Tina, Dan, Z, Spike. This is awesome. And again, there's so much more to talk about. So we're grateful for your time, and hopefully this leads to inspiration and further conversation in the fungi world. So thank you.
Thank you. You guys did a great job for having to take it over so suddenly.
Thank you. Yeah, we've learned a ton in this process. So yeah, thanks so much.